This week's podcast is proudly sponsored by Philips OLED Plus TV. OLED Plus is the unique, multi-award winning combination of the latest OLED technology, working with Philips P5 AI dual engine picture processing, Philips Ambilight and Bowers & Wilkins superb sound. Philips OLED Plus redefines what's possible for both picture quality and sound quality, immersive performance in the premium TV market. Discover more at philips.com/OLED Plus.
Hello and welcome to the AV Forums podcast, streaming live on the 24th of November. It's going to be one of those nights because one of our contributors is having internet problems, but I'm sure he'll pop along any moment soon. But also joining me tonight, other than Steve Withers, who's just popped up on screen, is Ed Selley.
Curse you, tiny toilet.
We're not going to get a quote from Steve because obviously he's having audio problems, but hopefully he'll join us when he can. So, well, he's here. He's here and he's done. No, it's something wrong with his audio. Yeah, something wrong with your audio. So yeah, we'll get it sorted. But anyway, let's crack on. So welcome back. We're here for the next hour, talking about lots of things tonight. So we've got competitions coming up, plenty of things to enter there. Some really cracking prizes. Ed's going to go through those in a second and also tell you who the previous competition winners are as well. We're going to move on to hardware. We'll quickly touch on the shootout from last week. There's been lots of comments. We'll quickly go through some of those comments and answer some of the questions around that. I'm quickly going to give you my final thoughts on the JZ2000, the Panasonic. It's been reviewed. It was reviewed a few weeks ago, just before the show, actually. Yet to write it up, which is the way these days. Lots of things to do with these reviews and all the rest of it. The review's coming soon. We'll give you my final thoughts on that. There's also some news about new features that Panasonic have added today via firmware. TV calibration, is it needed? Are TVs just so good out the box? There was lots of questions at the event at Abbey Road last week, which prompted me to talk about this tonight. So we will very briefly talk about TV calibration and are the out of the box presets as good as we say in the reviews and as people saw in the evening. So we'll go through that. We're also briefly going to go over the editor's choice. It's award season. We're rounding up our pick of the home AV and hi-fi products. So we'll quickly go through those. Both of them are, both the articles are published. They're on the homepage. So if you want to go and read through those, and if you have any questions, you can pop them into the live chat window. If you're in the live chat, good evening. If you're joining us live on YouTube, it's good to see you yet again. If you're not joining us live, you're listening a little bit later on in the week, maybe you're out walking the dog or whatever, welcome to you as well. It is appreciated that you download and listen to the podcast. And of course, if you have any questions, send them to podcast@avforums.com. We've got a question that came in via email from one of our patrons. We'll get to that a little bit later on as well and hopefully answer his questions for him. Plus, we've got software. So we've got album of the week from Ed. We've also got Steve's 4K disc of the week. And we're going to wrap up with what we've been watching and a very controversial Bake Off final. Semi-final, Ed, did you watch the semi-final?
I'm well behind on Bake Off.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Oh, well, there's been some controversy. Anyway, we're going to talk about our TVs and what we've been watching towards the end. And of course, there's the podcast competition, the exclusive podcast competition, which you can win as well. So that's everything that we're going to get through this evening. Hopefully, Steve's going to join us at some point. Like I say, he's having a little bit of technical issues. It seems to be doubling up whenever he says something. He's repeating it twice, which when Steve gets off on a rant, that's going to be interesting hearing it twice. Right. So let's find out what Ed's been doing this week. Ed, what have you been up to?
I have been standard work-based stuff. I had to do a full changeover of kit this morning, and it's an unheralded part of how much time it takes in terms of the overall review exercise to get a large swathe of items back into their box and then get everything out and then get shipping arranged for things.
I think it's a great idea for a TV. You remember Krypton Factor where you had to fit all the different shapes into holes?
I don't have that. And I have to say, everything I boxed and unboxed today had good packaging. But nevertheless, it's still fiddly. It's still time consuming.
It's interesting that us reviewers talk about packaging a hell of a lot and it's because we unpack and then have to repack, whereas people are buying products, they only have to do it the one way. It's interesting trying to repackage things, especially speakers.
I have to be honest, I only comment these days on unboxing. because the whole idea that you as a customer will only do the unboxing. You may revisit putting it back in the box in some years' time. But packaging is designed these days, especially more affordable products, is designed to get the product there in one piece. It has no functionality beyond that point.
Yeah. Totally.
So it's not a legitimate criticism. Us whinging is of no consequence to the wider industry, however frustrating you or I might find it. But that's all done. I've got my Christmas extravaganza product arrives tomorrow. So I've been trying to clear the decks for that. It's not as big as last year's Christmas extravaganza product, in so much as it only comes in one box. So it's a significant step forward. Although I stress it's not actually significantly more affordable than last year's Christmas extravaganza product, even though it comes in one box. So been getting ready for that. I've been trying to ask on a non-review basis. I've been trying to ask my son what he wants for Christmas. And basically he just wants Robux. Which is not a particularly exciting thing to unpack, and that's going to be an issue. Although I did today, I thought, I'll get him a fun. I know his mother's getting him some interesting themed duvet covers and bedding for his bedroom at the other house. Thought I'll have a look at that. I disappeared down the bedding rabbit hole on eBay. How much for an unopened 1984 Transformers single duvet cover and pillowcase? What do you reckon, Phil?
No idea.
£400. Presumably it's worth buttons once you actually unpack it, so you can't actually use it as bedding. So yeah, that was exciting. But no, otherwise it's just been just plowing through stuff. I'm going to try and actually have something over Christmas, time off over Christmas. So we'll see where we go from there. But that means working pretty intensely up until that point.
I think we're all doing that. Gareth Little says, have you ever shot a time-lapse video of you slowly knackering your back during a swap out, Ed?
I haven't done that. Ever since we did that time-lapse video at CES, I've found the construct slightly horrifying. So I haven't gone near them ever since then. But I dare say if there was, I mean, to be honest, as I say, it's technique. You know, if you've got a giant pair of floor standers to get back in the box, you do not lift the floor stander into the box. You get the box over the speaker and deal with it from there. You know, just work smart, not work harder. So
well, you notice, boxes behind me here for 65-inch TVs. I'm here on my own. I have a way of doing it now where I've developed a strategy using the sofa and the way that these boxes unpack as well. I've now found a way where I can unpack one, set it up, set the stand up, connect the stand to the TV and lift it onto the TV rack all on my own. But it's taken a long time to get to that. And the thing I was getting at, Ed, is there's only us reviewers that tend to repack stuff. And we've got it down to an art form. You know, it's because you do it so many times and you have to put the polystyrene back in certain ways. It makes it interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I've had one item which physically I had to ring the manufacturer up and say it's not going back in the box because the packaging was so one shot, and they did freely admit, it's one shot. So they just sent a nice man in a van round to come and get it.
I noticed that obviously Samsung made a big thing at CES about their packaging now being environmentally friendly, and you can reuse it to make it into different things. So it'd be interesting to see how many people actually do that with the packaging. They're trying to be green. They're trying to make it more than just one use. But has anybody had any experience of that? If anybody's bought a Samsung product and had the box and used the box for something else, let us know in the chat or send us an email or stick a post in the thread under this podcast in the podcast forums. We're waiting to see if Steve's going to come back. He's actually just sent me a message just to say that his internet's down completely. So hopefully if he gets his internet back, he'll join us a little bit later.
Otherwise, it looks like monologue dramatically.
Yeah, it looks like you're stuck with us tonight, unfortunately. For you guys, you're going to have to put up with me and Ed. And that's likely to turn to cars at some point.
Yeah,
and then
be warned.
And then go completely down the rabbit hole somewhere else. So you have been pre-warned. So what I've been up to, well, obviously we were down in London last week for the shootout event, which we were invited along to. which was really, really excellent. I've been to Abbey Road a few times. I know that all the AV Forums members, readers and listeners who joined us on the evening were obviously blown away by Studio 2 as well. Studio 2 is where 80-something% of the Beatles output was recorded in that studio. It has history dripping everywhere. And of course, lots of other famous studios. There's 3 of the main studios are famous. Studio 1 is the one for film soundtracks. There was a full orchestra set up on the Tuesday when we were there. And it was nice as well. Once we were in through reception, we could wander about the building basically and take it in and look at all the photographs and everything. It's a fantastic venue. Lots and lots and lots of history there. And you forget how long it's been around. You know, it's been around since almost the dawn of sound. It's been around that long, so it's a fantastic venue. But lots of members joining us there. It was fantastic. So we're going to come on and talk about that a little bit. On the following evening, I stayed for a couple of days after, just because I thought, well, if I'm making the effort of going to London, I'm going to stay for a couple of days and do a few bits and pieces. So I went to see The Lion King in the West End. I've never seen it before. I heard lots of good things about it. I love the film, the original animated Disney film. I think it was the first Laserdisc I ever heard in Dolby Digital 5.1. That's how long we're going back. It was.
Was it AC3 or?
It was AC3. Yeah, AC3. Really, really back in the day. I mean, I ended up buying a Pioneer 925 dual-sided Laserdisc player with the RF demodulator and the Yamaha, and the first Yamaha that did AC3, later to be known as Dolby Vision. Dolby Digital 5.1. Yeah, so that was the first Laserdisc I've ever had. So I saw the stage production, absolutely fantastic. If you get an opportunity to go and see it, highly recommended. It's fantastic to get out again as well and go and see these events and so on. Security was good. The COVID stuff was as good as you can expect it. So yeah, that's what I got up to. And other than walking the dog, and I'm dog sitting again tonight, but she's a bit camera shy tonight. I don't know where she's gone. Dog's sitting again tonight. So that's what I've been up to. And of course, reviewing and so on. As you can see, still got the boxes behind me. We're getting to Editor's Choice as well with the TVs and stuff. So that's coming up soon as well. So yeah, lots of things going on. So Ed, why don't you tell us what we can win competitions before we start talking about all this hardware?
It's an absolute cornucopia of stuff. Right, you can win a Denon AVR-X 1700H AV receiver worth £599. That's courtesy of Peter Tyson. There's a pair of Monitor Audio Silver 57G speakers worth £575. A free Polk React soundbar with Alexa built in worth £249. A Violet smart switch worth £169. One of 5 sets of Yamaha's TW E3B True Wireless earphones worth £109 each. And one of 3 sets of Earfun Free Pro earbuds. Yeah, I don't want to say that repeatedly quickly. Worth £69.99 each. We've also got a James Bond No Time to Die microskeletric set worth £60, as well as the entire 40-film collection of Clint Eastwood movies, and well over a dozen 4K and Blu-ray sets to give away, including a £50 limited collector's edition 4K sets of The Outsiders and Second Sight's The Guest, as well as Second Sight's limited edition Swallow Blu-ray, and patron exclusive access to Criterion's November titles Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within 4K, Don't Breathe 2 4K, and The Guns of Navarone on 4K. So head over to avforums.com/competitions to enter. All competitions are open to eligible forums members resident in the UK who are not called Phil Hinton. We've got previous winners and all. Monkey Junk won the podcast exclusive copy of Hearts of Darkness, A Filmmaker's Apocalypse on Blu-ray. Makusu won the Patreon exclusive 4K double bill of Resident Evil Retribution in the Final Chapter. Snakebite won a copy of Escape Room 2 on Blu-ray. Fleximus won a copy of Demonic on Blu-ray. R5KOD won a copy of Spirit Untamed, the movie, on Blu-ray. Well done to you all. Stay tuned for a chance to win a podcast exclusive copy. Hang on a second, this blooming podcast exclusive copy of Mortimer and Whitehouse Gone Fishing, the complete 4th series on Blu-ray. So there's all to play for. Yes, well, I mean, it's just
I know it's been running a while, but I didn't realize it was actually in its
it's
fourth
glorious,
season.
glorious.
It's good.
television.
The ones I've caught that have been excellent TV. So there you go. Your chance to win that in the podcast exclusive. So stick around to the end of the podcast for the question that you'll need to find the answer that's on the competitions page. So like I say, we're going to go to hardware, and that's coming up next.
If you'd like to support the AV Forums podcast on a regular basis, then why not become a patron? Head over to patreon.com/AV Forums to sign up. You can also make a one-off donation through the Super Chat or via streamlabs.com/AV Forums. All donations help us to improve the website and the podcasts. Thank you to all our supporters.
Okay, so like I say, we spent the day at Abbey Road last Tuesday. We were invited along to the Philips shootout. So I guess just before we get into this, we have to make it absolutely clear, and we have made it absolutely clear in all the articles and the videos and so on. This was a Philips event. It wasn't a Philips sponsored event. It wasn't an AV Forums event. This was a Philips event, which AV Forums members were invited along to. They wanted the AV Forums members there because, well, you guys who are listening to the podcast, you know what you're talking about when it comes to TV. You know what you want. You know what kind of picture quality you want, and you know what you want from your TVs. And you are the type of audience who, when sat down in front of TVs and asked to give an opinion, you would give an opinion, and that's what Philips wanted on this. Now, it was split into two parts, and this is the important part. The first part was the part that we endorsed as observers there, and that was the calibrated and filmmaker mode. So we calibrated the TVs for SDR, so standard dynamic range. They were calibrated to the standards, so Rec 709 for color, D65 white, and gamma at BT 1886. Then the second part, the HDR part of that, was done in filmmaker mode. So all the TVs were set to filmmaker mode, apart from obviously the Sony, which has to use custom for Pro 1, which Steve calibrated all the TVs. So that was the reason we were there, myself and Steve, and obviously to report back on what actually happened. And then the second part of the evening was the vivid mode test. And this was the part that we were not involved in, and we didn't set the TVs up at all for this. Philips were in complete control of the second half of the evening. So if you want to know what the AV Forums members thought of the TVs in the best possible out of the box mode and in calibrated, then the first part, the first set of results are the important ones. If you're interested in that and comparing those results with any other shootouts that are out there, it's the first part. Ignore the vivid part and the combined scores. If that is what you're interested in, then look at the calibrated and the filmmaker mode section. That'll give you a fair representation of what 27 AV Forums members thought in that room. With the TVs were completely disguised. It was done fairly in the first section of the evening. You couldn't tell which TV was which. They were not on their original stands. They were all on the same type of stand to make them all the same height. Then the bezels and everything else were taped up in black material in front of them. And then every time an input was made, a black screen or black sheet was raised up in front of the TVs, so nobody in the room could actually see any prompts that would appear on the screen that would perhaps give away which TV was which. And certainly for the first two sections, the results were no preference. And that shouldn't be a shocker to anybody. I read comments saying, oh, well, the Sony would blow away all the other TVs. It must have been rigged. And, oh, the Panasonic is the best TV there. It should have looked the best, and so on. If you're getting a result of no preference being the winner, that means that calibration works. Because the whole point of calibration is to make something look identical to a standard. And if all four are identical to the standard and they're all set to the same standard, they're all going to look the same. That is kind of the point of calibration. So actually the results on the day were not a shock, to be honest, for the first two sections. Now, the second section, I've read a lot of comments, and the comments are right. That was Philips' section. It wasn't being hidden from anybody. And it was a Philips event that hasn't been hidden from anybody whatsoever. Everybody's been upfront about what the purpose of the evening was and so on. And certainly our involvement, myself and Steve's involvement, were there as independent observers for the first two sections, which was calibrated in filmmaker mode. And we didn't get involved with vivid mode, which was obviously what Philips wanted to do. They wanted to show off their video processing, which they think is the best. And the results obviously mirror that, because obviously that's what looked the best in the second part. So I know Steve's joined us again. I can see him now on the camera. Is your sound working now, Steve, do you think?
I don't know, you tell me.
It sounds a little bit decent. So have you heard anything? Do you want to make any points at this point about Abbey Road and how the TVs were set up and so on?
I'd say that it was a complete blind test. So nobody in the audience had any idea which TV was which. As you said, Phil, they were on identical levels. They were all set same level.
You're still broken, Steve.
Am I still broken? I can't think about it.
Okay. It's unfortunately, every time you say something, Steve, it's repeating
itself. We just get it twice.
So we get it twice.
Something's gone wrong in my, I don't know what's going on.
Well, we'll leave you to try and sort that out and have a play about with your audio settings and see if you can fix that. But anyway,
I'll have to pretend I know about televisions. It'll be fine.
Just to wrap up on the Abbey Road section. Anyway, what Steve was saying, it was fair. It was blind. For the first two sections, if you want to compare that with any other shootout out there, those are the two sections to be interested in, because they were done fairly. The only thing that we had no control over was the clips, but I didn't find the clips contentious in any way. It's clips that have been used in lots and lots of demos. They're actually demo clips that some reviewers use for their reviews and stuff. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Basically, I haven't read all the comments out there, and I knew the comments were coming. Oh, it's a fix and all the rest. Well, it was a Philips event. It wasn't fixed in the first two sections. The second section was Philips trying to show off the picture processing against the others. And to be honest with you, I thought they were very, very brave to do what they did, which was put their TV up against three absolutely cracking TVs. And the truth of the matter is, all four TVs are incredibly strong. When you're talking about differences, and if this goes for our shootout, it goes for our reviews, it goes for other shootouts out there, the differences are tiny between these TVs. Each has the slight pros and cons, depending on what the manufacturer wants in terms of the accurate modes. If you are calibrating them, having them calibrated, or setting them in filmmaker mode or whatever, you're going to get an absolutely cracking picture of all four of these TVs. The differences are just really, really small. And the problem is that when you read things on the internet, or you look at a YouTube video or whatever, it's easy to blow these things up and think that the differences between the sets are massive, and that, oh, the Sony outperforms this and the Panasonic does this better and all the rest of it. We're talking about minute differences at the end of the day, especially when you're looking at accurate, calibrated, or filmmaker mode out of the box. And it kind of brings us on to a question I got asked a lot on the evening, which was, should I get my TV calibrated? Is it now the case that filmmaker mode or custom mode or cinema mode out of the box is so good that you don't need the TV calibrated? These settings are incredibly accurate out of the box. They are getting very, very close out of the box. Now, you are going to get variances, and this is where we need to set expectations a little bit here. You are going to get differences, sometimes 10% differences, and 10% can be quite a bit when it comes to picture quality. And you're basically talking about a TV that comes off a production line. You know, that TV is not going to be calibrated by somebody on the line. It's done by calculations and so on. As it's coming down the line, settings are put into the TV, and it works it out from there, and it gives you a picture mode. It has to be quick on a production line. You can't stand and calibrate every TV that comes up, otherwise TVs would cost an absolute fortune. But they're getting so good at this now that the TVs do get close. Is it as good as calibration? Well, the thing with calibration is it's not just about setting the picture up correctly on the TV. It's actually about matching that picture to your viewing environment, which is something that an out-of-the-box preset cannot do. It can be set with a meter, so what you're seeing from the screen matches what's on the software, but that might not work if that TV's up on a red colored wall, for example, or it's being used in a brightly lit room. It needs slightly different settings for different environments. What's the source being used? Is the source manipulating the image in any way? Does the source need to be calibrated? So that could be your Blu-ray player, or is your AVR adding something into the mix? If your video is going through your AVR, does your AVR have picture settings? Most of them, most recent ones, have some video settings in there that could be switched on and could be tampering with the image. So when it comes to calibration, it's not just about the picture quality and measuring the TV, it's about measuring the whole chain. It's about making sure that that system is perfect from source right the way through to screen, and that what you're seeing is an image that is hitting the standards, and it's hitting the standards for every source that you're sending to the TV. So it was a question that got asked a lot of times on the evening. I hope that gives you some indication as to what calibration is over and above the out-of-the-box settings. But there's no doubting that filmmaker mode has been a revelation since it was added to TVs. It's gotten things very, very close. But if you still want your system set up to fire on all cylinders, be running on V-Power petrol or whatever, you buy a performance car, you run on performance fuels. You buy a nice system, you get it calibrated, and you get the whole system calibrated, not just the picture quality for one source. It's the picture quality for all sources. It's making sure the video chain is working to its absolute best. And of course, you've got complications now with HDR and Dolby Vision. And so it's not just about calibrating TV once. There's now 3 possible steps, HDR10, Dolby Vision calibration as well. It's all possible nowadays. CalMan interface is getting better and better with these TVs as well. So you have AutoCal, where you can really go in and make some really minute details. When it comes to just above black, shadow detail and so on, some of these sets need a little bit of tweaking to get them working at their absolute best as well. So yes, the out of the box settings are great these days. From where we were back in 2007, 2008, when AV forums were petitioning manufacturers and asking and begging them to put calibration controls onto their TVs, and we were working with bodies like THX and Joel Silver at ISF and trying to get manufacturers to talk to these other bodies and for everybody in the industry to talk together. And it wasn't just us, there was other people pushing for it. And, in the last 10 years, that has happened. It's gotten really, really good now. These TVs are absolutely fantastic out of the box in the right settings. You can get them very close. But at the same time, calibration has its place. It's still worth the money. If you have invested quite a bit of money in your display and your sources and so on, it's still worth that investment. And that investment, it's what, 7-8% of the total cost, probably. If you're going for a high-end TV, it's absolutely worth it. So if you've got any questions for this evening, then of course drop them in the chat window if you're watching live. And obviously, if you're not watching us live and you want to ask questions, then use the thread under the podcast in the podcast forum, or you can send us an email, podcast@AV Forums. And just touching on the shootout, one of the TVs there was the JZ2000 for Panasonic. This is the replacement for the HZ2000. It is their flagship TV. One of the big changes this year with Panasonic was the JZ1500, the TV that sits underneath this TV. It now has the same panel, which is, for all intents and purposes, a very highly tweaked version of what LG Display will call their Evo panel this year. Panasonic have been doing it for a few years, where they take the panel and they do their own engineering, adding the heat sink and adding their tweaks to that, so they can produce an image that is bright for specular highlights and also gets full screen. And when we talk about full screen, we're talking about full 100% white on a screen, getting that brightness the same in HDR or higher in HDR than is capable on other TVs. So a normal OLED panel TV from LG is round about 120, 130 nits with 100% brightness on screen. These panels can kick out 155, 165. So it's 20% and more above what normal OLED panels do. And that's a big leap up. And of course, that generates heat if you're pushing out that kind of brightness. And this is where the heat sink and the cooling comes in, and it also helps against image retention, having that technology. So I guess the main question when it comes to the JZ2000 is, how does it compare with the JZ1500? Well, apart from the Dolby Atmos sound system that is included on the 2000 with the up-firing speakers and the soundbar, picture-wise, they are identical. It's the same panel being used. It's the same power. It's the same power board. It's on board as well. There's no differences there. There's no differences in picture quality. And my measurements between the 1500 and the 2000, even though there were different screen sizes, 1500 was a 65-inch, the 2000 was a 55-inch. They are within tolerance, basically. They are almost identical. So in terms of picture quality, Panasonic have done what they said they were going to do. The JZ1500 doesn't have the Atmos speaker system. Get that TV if you have an outboard system, if you have an outboard Atmos system or a home cinema system, 5.1, whatever. If you have your sound sorted, the 1500 is for you. JZ1500 is the TV for you for the picture quality. If you don't have an audio system and it's something that you're looking forward to and having some Atmos and so on, you have dedicated upward firing speakers on the JZ2000 as well as the soundbar, which is tuned by Technics. It sounds really, really good. It sounds about the same as a mid-level, mid-range standalone soundbar. There is no subwoofer. However, what Panasonic do is they change the headphone out. So the 3.5mm jack, headphone jack, you can change that to a subwoofer output in the menus. And then you can actually go in and dial in your crossover as well. So you can dial in from 100 hertz upwards. So that is unique to Panasonic, actually. Philips have a pre-out on theirs, but they don't have a crossover setting on their TVs. So if you want the sound system, and you can add a sub to the 1500 as well, you have a pretty decent system there on the 2000. It sounds just as good as a mid-range soundbar. And of course, you can add the subwoofer in there for a little bit extra oomph. In terms of picture quality, identical to the 1500. The 1500 review is up. It's a absolutely cracking TV for home cinema use. And what I mean by that is, if you watch movies in the dark, you want to see movies as they were mastered and intended to be seen, you're going to get it on the Panasonic. And one of the areas where it really does perform that little bit better than the other three that were in the shootout, and that is just above black detail. It brings out just a little bit more in the shadows where it should, where a lot of these OLED TVs, they do crush a little bit of the detail in the lowest end, in the blacks. Nope, the Panasonic, it just manages to bring that little bit extra out that you should be able to see, and that's the difference basically. Color wise, it's very, very close between all the screens. I think if I was being picky, I prefer the Panasonic in terms of color compared to the Sony, but they're very, very close. So the review will be up soon. Look out for that.
Just to confirm, Phil, is 65 the upper size for both of them?
Yes, they don't do 77.
But I knew they didn't do a 77 for the 1500. So this isn't a point of distinction either. It's the same for both.
No, Panasonic don't do. They do 55, 65 with this panel. If you buy the 48, and you will be able to buy a 48 in the 1500 and 2000, it's not the panel with the heatsink. Yeah. So it's a normal LG display panel, but with all the other features added. So you get the HCX Pro processor and so on. You just don't get the extra brightness on the 48-inch model. So just be aware of that. If you are looking at the 1500 and 2000, if you want that extra brightness, it's 55 and 65 screen sizes. Good point, Ed. Thanks for mentioning that.
It's about the only thing I understand of television, so I thought it was probably worth broaching.
Yeah. So basically, that's covered TVs. We're on the hour or just over the hour mark, so that's not too bad. We're into the last section of the podcast, so we've plenty of time to talk. We didn't need Steve. Another bit of news, just while we're talking about the Panasonic, is that today they launched some firmware which adds VRR and high frame rate at 4K resolution. They use a MediaTek chip, same as Philips and Sony. All of those sets with some settings in terms of VRR, it was half resolution at 4K. that this is not the case now on the Panasonic. You will get 4K resolution with high frame rate. And you also get VRR. You also get VRR up to 60 hertz with Dolby Vision. So Panasonic have delivered, they said they would, on their HDMI 2.1 ports, and obviously that applies to the JZ models that we've just been talking about, and the GX940 and above. So all the 2021 models that support HDMI 2.1, they all have that. And the update also adds a new 4K 120 hertz bypass mode option in the picture menu, and you can activate that, and it enables 4K VRR by bypassing the picture processing, so which is actually similar to the pure direct mode. So there you go, Panasonic adding an update to their TVs, which will now get around that issue that was there to begin with. So well done, Panasonic, on that one. Hopefully Philips and the others will now follow suit now that there is a solution to the issue. Right, so we've covered calibration, we've covered the shootout, we've covered the JZ2000, and we need to move now to the editor's choice. No, so what is editor's choice? Why is the product that you thought was going to win not in there? Basically, there are a few criteria that have to be met. The main criteria is we have to have reviewed the product. So we don't give awards to things that we haven't seen, we haven't reviewed, we haven't tested. So if we haven't seen it, if we haven't reviewed it, we haven't tested it, it ain't getting an award. So it's not going to be within our awards. And the other thing is it has to be within the last 12 months for most of these categories. If it's not, it will be clearly stated in the write-up as to why that product has been picked if it is longer than 12 months old or older than 12 months old. But generally, it has to have been a product we've seen in the last 12 months and reviewed and tested. So Ed obviously looked at hi-fi. So Ed, let's get a little bit of hi-fi talk going. Give us a brief recap, because obviously the article's up there.
Yeah,
people can go.
I'm not going through this line by line for that very reason. The one thing I wanted to, and I have to say, thank you for the positive feedback on the awards as given that have been in the comments. Something I also wanted to reiterate, and it's easier to talk about it than it is to write about it. I am very keen to stress, and there's been the case for some years, but it is more and more applicable now, that technical brilliance is not exactly in a perfect parallel to a genuinely excellent product. There are award winners in the 2021 Editor's Choice Awards where I probably tested something that was more sophisticated at the same time, but their sophistication did not necessarily result in a better product. The Arcam ST60, for example, which grabbed an Editor's Choice Award. In streaming product terms, there are much more sophisticated products out there, but very few of them are as nice to use or sound as good. And ultimately, do you want a checklist of formats that you're realistically never going to play? Or do you want it to be nice to use and really great sounding for the rest of the time that you own it? Because, you ask yourself that question. I'm hoping that you might come down on the second of those options. Likewise, the Rotel Michi X3 is nowhere near as sophisticated as the Technics 700 integrated that also was reviewed in 2021, but it is the better amplifier. It's the one that if it was my money, I would choose, because it's better to live with, it's easier to use, and it sounds better. So people have, as I say, the comments in the base of this have been largely positive, but this is something which I'm going to keep making a play of, both in future awards and in reviews, more and more, because unlike TV and to a lesser extent multi-channel, we aren't in quite the same relentless pace of technical change now. If you have a fixed sort of level of capability, the chances are you will be able to handle the overwhelming majority of content. So having greater capacity than that is useful, but it is not the be all and end all, in the same way that Phil is not going to give an award for a product which doesn't actually have, HDR in 2021. There's less simply because you can play DSD 512 doesn't mean that you're going to have an enormous library of them. So this is something that has steered all of the awards that were given over the course of this year. I have, where possible, tried to ensure that there are both relatively affordable, and I am aware that the word affordable means different things to different people. I mean, for example, the affordable stereo amplifier is £900. That is a lot of money. I'm not going to pretend it's otherwise, but it is a product that should hopefully give you a good decade's worth of enjoyment. So £90 a year, that's hopefully a better calculation. But there are, and then also obviously some rather more expensive things in the test, in the awards as well. So hopefully there's a decent spread of them there. I will say that there were some awards more easily awarded than others. The Q Acoustics M20, the powered speaker that was reviewed that relatively recently, that came very, very close to bagging product of the year as well, because it is sensational for 400 quid. It really is very, very good. And you've just scrolled past it for people watching, the IFI Zen phono stage. That was supposed to be the start of me reviewing multiple phono stages, but it's so bloody good that there isn't another affordable phono stage I've found that's actually worth me comparing to it yet. So if that changes, I will of course bring it to your attention. So with items such as that, hopefully the explanation as to why it got the award over and above other things that were reviewed has been there. If you're unclear of why something bested something else, do bring it up in the comments and I'll do my best to explain it. Beyond the individual awards, I did want to try to extend a bit more on the sort of two major awards. There's Manufacturer of the Year and Product of the Year. Manufacturer of the Year, IFI have won one award this year, and that's actually not through design, it's by accident. That's the same as every other manufacturer in the list. The thing is that IFI couldn't really win more than one award because all of the items that I tested of theirs in 2021 was affordable source equipment. So they essentially won the award 3 times in a row. And I feel that this warrants recognition, the sheer quality of equipment that IFI is turning out at what are very sensible prices. I do genuinely think that the word affordable is warranted when talking about what they do. I felt that was worthy of recognition for the Manufacturer of the Year award, because what they are doing is producing equipment which is in some regards state of the art. I mean, the Bluetooth DAC can do things that very little else at any price can do. The measured performance of the updated Zendac V2, I've seen bench results of that and it's outstanding. The stream is startlingly ambitious. It has the prospect of changing how we use our audio systems. And the phono, as I've discussed, is so good, it actually killed my attempts to review any more of them this year. So that's generally a pretty good sign. IFI is a real motive force in this industry at the moment. They are doing things that are making other companies respond and try harder, and for you, the consumer, that can only be a good thing. So as far as I'm concerned, they are the Manufacturer of the Year. Excuse me. And then Product of the Year. Most of you will have spotted that this was a bit of a last minute one, because I agreed to review the Copeland CSA70 because it's an exclusive for AV Forums. We have the first review anywhere in Europe of it. And that was the reason I pushed it through. And I knew it was going to be good. I didn't think it was going to be quite as good as it is. It's a simply peerless bit of equipment. It ticks every box that you should be asking a relatively high-end piece of hi-fi equipment to tick. It does a great deal. It does all of it well. It's beautifully made. It's easy to use. It looks attractive. It's going to sit in spaces and not look like it was assembled by a madman out of things he found in his shed. It is a genuinely outstanding product across every single facet of what it sets out to do. It makes you feel happy and content just using it. And when you sit down and listen to it, as I said in the actual review, which is up on the site, this isn't a product which has you wowed after 10 minutes, but after about an hour, you'll be going, I don't know what I'd do if I didn't have this. And that's a fun, that's everything that these products should be. I'm aware that it's more expensive than last year's products of the year, which was 380 quid, but they can't always be absolute bargains. I would counter that relative to its competition, this is stupendous value for money. It is obviously quite a bit more money, but it is a sensational product. As I say, if you have any questions about the other ones, I don't want to just recite the list from here. I think they are all worthy winners. Obviously, some categories are more keenly contested than others, but I am confident that the products in that list are the best ones that we saw this year.
It's always difficult to put together a list like this, and without it looking like primary school sports day where everybody wins an award and so on. We genuinely try and stay away from that kind of thing. We genuinely try and come up with categories that do cover products that not only have we reviewed, but like you say, Ed, that are worthy of us putting forward as recommendations. One of the things we always do with our reviews is we always say, don't make a buying decision based solely on a review.
No.
Always do your homework. When it comes to editor's choice, these are our picks, once again, of what we think are the best products, and probably what we, if we had the budgets, would probably spend our own cash on, and products that we'd love to have in our own system. So yeah, it's interesting when we get to this point of the year. It's good fun, but also at the same time, it can be very, very difficult to actually choose your winners. So the Home AV Awards, which Steve was going to talk about tonight, unfortunately, Steve has now given up on the internet.
Not literally, you understand.
He couldn't get it. He couldn't get it working. We'll make sure that he's around for the next 2 podcasts in December, and we'll let you know what the podcasts are going to be a little bit later on. But yes, he'll be around a little bit later. So if you want to see Home AV, his article is up. It's been up since the 14th. So it's been up a little while now. Hopefully most of you have seen it. If not, get across and have a look at it, see what you think of the products that Steve has mentioned in there.
There is one thing I will say in Steve's, because Steve, there were more, obviously it's AV forums, there's always going to be more comments on the AV categories. First, Phil has already explained one thing that was reiterated again. We aren't going to give an award to something that we haven't tested. No less pertinent to this year is the nature that certain categories are more populated than others, both in 2-channel and multi-channel. Certain products, because of shortages and so on and so forth, we didn't see as many in certain categories, and some categories are not as active as others. Something which is present in the AV side of things as a whole, more so than 2-channel, there were criticisms that affordable product was often a significant sum of money. The bottom rung of AV, as in classic AV as we understand it with AV receivers and speaker packages, is much more of a niche concern than it was even a couple of years ago. It has been eroded both by 2-channel, but by soundbars, by wireless speakers, by other categories, and so on and so forth. So what you're looking at across home AV and hi-fi is the homogeneous product set. It's why certain categories of AV have moved up price-wise, because that is where they are now contested. We're not elitists. I know I'm prone to elitism from time to time, but the aim of what we do is not elitist. But there are certain product categories which are, I am afraid, no longer really active at the sort of price points that they were a couple of years ago. And we work with the cloth that we're given. So that's the reality of it. Steve again goes out of his way to cover as much equipment across as wide a price point as is practical, but there are certain products that are no longer really active in certain price points. It's not us picking, refusing to acknowledge their existence. They're just not particularly numerous anymore. Yeah,
absolutely. If they're good products at any price point, we will normally cover them. And I'm glad you touched on the point of supply as well. Supply has been quite difficult this year for certain review products and certain products. Stuff that was supposed to come out at the beginning of the year is only now just getting itself out to reviewers, which has been a little bit too late for the awards as well. And It's another thing when it comes to the awards end of year. Is it the end of the year, or should you do the awards in the middle of the year, or when do the products come out? Well, normally you could do it a little bit earlier in the year, but this year has just been really bad, and last year as well with the pandemic. Things are all over the place. So what used to be common release windows no longer exist.
Yeah.
And that also impacts on
it's
what we can
why
see,
I mean
what we
this year for
Blu-ray.
2-channel, that's why there are quite a few. There's 4 speaker categories because speakers were nowhere near as catastrophically affected as electronics. And conversely, obviously there was only I reviewed a far smaller number of turntables because most turntables stayed out in the field just on a longer model year run. Many of the same things apply to AV as well. And just as reiterate, as I say, you can't stand. I mean, there's arguments for and against having a product that won the award last year stay and compete again this year, and a certain well-known publication does that, and it leads to a very interesting dynamic. And there are certain pros and cons. There are certain arguments to say if something hasn't been bettered in that year, then give it to the same thing again. But our view is we'd rather bring your attention to the best things that we've looked at this year. I mean, to be clear, I think that Copeland is an excellent product. It doesn't mean that the Riga Ethos, which won that category last year, has suddenly become rubbish. Absolutely far from it. It's still a superlative amplifier. But I thought it was much more important for me to bring to your attention something that I've looked at this year.
Yeah. Mr. H asked a question. He's bought a 77-inch Sony A80J. Well done. That's a big TV. Hope you're enjoying it. You're looking for recommended settings, but you're finding a few different lists. Is the Picture Perfect still a thing? Yes, thanks for mentioning that. Picture Perfect absolutely is a thing. You can find it on the website. Just go to the menus and click down. I think it's under editorial these days. If you find that, then click on it. The whole guide is there. You can also look at the AV Forums YouTube channel and click the search on there when you're on the channel and type in Picture Perfect. It'll bring up all the videos so you can watch that as well. If you're looking at the Sony A80J, I have done a settings video which will go out very soon. Basically put it into custom mode and go into motion flow, make sure motion flow is set correctly, which is normally off depending on the content you're watching. If it's film content, then that's normally the correct setting for that. I'm trying to think off the top of my head if there's anything else, but generally custom is a good starting point for you. That's going to get things really quite accurate. Again, the only differences there are going to be motion and setting that correctly for 24 frames per second content. Also noticed there was a question in there as well. Mr. Falls, you didn't like the judder on the LG C1, so he sent it back and got the A80J Sony. Better, thank you. Right. Again, questions like that, if you can try and be a little bit more specific in terms of why you're seeing the judder, which picture mode you're in, and what you actually have the motion settings set to, it just helps us give you a little bit better advice then when we know exactly what you have it set to. We can then advise you as to if that is the correct setting for the content that you're watching, or if you need to change that setting. So we're more than happy to give you settings tips and advice. We're not going to charge you. We're not going to make you become a patron or anything like that. It's it's free information. It's on the forums, and that's what we're here for. That's why we exist. So any questions like that, then if we can answer them on the evening, we will. If we need to do a little bit of research, we'll do that and we'll come back to you. So any questions at all, you can do that. And I'm just looking through just to see if there's any other questions that we may have missed tonight, because funnily enough, we're a little bit ahead of time this evening.
It's almost like a weird time sync has been.
Yes.
Funny, isn't it?
Something's been removed. So yeah. Obviously, it's unfortunate that Steve hasn't been around with us tonight because the home AV, there was some interesting things. We will come back to that. We will discuss it. And talking about home cinema side of things, the TV and projector awards are coming up. Projectors will be end of this week. So keep an eye out for that. It's a small selection because there hasn't been that many projectors announced, but we do have a Manufacturer of the Year award, which is a new award in that section as well. And then TVs will be next week. And the reason why it's next week, like I say, things have been coming in a little bit later this year, so I am playing catch up a little bit. I know what's won what. I just need to do a little bit more work on it, and then you will have the list of the best, or my picks for the best of the year, and that'll be next week. So keep an eye on the homepage for that. That'll have all the TVs in there, in various categories, as well as some awards for manufacturers and so on. Now, Paul said he emailed a question last week. I've just had a look. There is, it's not your question I have in the running order, unfortunately.
Oh, isn't it? Oh, okay.
That was from Brendan. So Brendan is a patron, and he sent me a message. Unfortunately, this is one that's probably better suited for Steve, because Steve's actually looked at the latest projectors and so on. But I'll give it a bash, because it's also a subject that I am well into as well. So you basically have a small dedicated room, black painted walls, excellent, blackout blinds, spot on, 105-inch screen. Yep, good size of screen. A Sony HW65 1080p projector and a 7.1.2 setup. Brendan says he loves his setup, especially the sound, but he's wondering when is the time to go 4K projector. He says my projector with a second bulb is great, and he doesn't really want to send 6,000 to 7,000 on a new native 4K projector. Should he buy a cheaper non-native 4K projector, or should he wait until the price of the Sony 4K comes down, or move to JVC that we love, or certainly Steve owns JVCs. So I guess if you're happy with what you've got, is it just resolution that you're looking for, or are you looking for adding in HDR tone mapping so you can watch some HDR content and so on? You haven't really said, you've only said 4K projector, so I have to assume that you're talking about native 4K and resolution. What I would say is that the test that I've done, unless it's been a test pattern, which I put up, a lot of the pixel shift technology, like the Epson that employs, where it's actually it's not a 4K native chip. It does a little bit of pixel remapping and pixel shifting to create that image, or like the DLPs, it flashes. The DLP chips flash very quickly, so it gives you a boost in resolution that it's not actually there. It's again pseudo created. The thing is, I've done testing with these, and obviously JVC eShift was a thing as well before they went native. Certainly the last model I still have it here, the X7900 with eShift, and I have a native 4K JVC. I've got the N5 here. When I've done side by sides at normal seating distance from my screen, which is 110 inches, it's very, very difficult when you're talking about resolution alone. It's other attributes in the image that you're going to notice in a side by side more than actual resolution. When it comes to HDR, projectors are not good at HDR at all. They certainly cannot get close to anything approaching what a TV can do, but obviously projected image is a reflected image. It's not a direct view like a TV, so you are going to suffer brightness. The ones that do it the best are unfortunately the more expensive models, so you are going to be spending that $6,000 and above for a machine that can actually do it with dynamic tone mapping and so on. The other solution is to add in a processor. Again, you're talking a little bit of money to do that as well. So there is no cost-effective solution at the minute in terms of good quality HDR. Some projectors in the lower reaches claim that they do HDR. They don't. They just can't produce the brightness. They'll have a tone map and they'll make a fist of trying to add some color. A lot of them, especially DLPs, really struggle with Rec 709, which is the HD standard. Never mind wide color gamut, which is your HDR standard, which is even wider. And a lot of projectors, like the Epsons, they put a filter in front to get that wide color gamut. But of course, if you put a filter in front of light, and light is your main engine for your image, you're going to dim the image by doing that. So you then suffer with a little bit of brightness. So there is no perfect solution for you there. Unfortunately, it's down to what you're actually looking for from the projector. If you're happy with your Sony and you want to say that you've got a separate 43-inch TV, is it cheaper just to get a 55-inch TV to see good 4K and then be happy with your cinema room? If you're happy with your cinema room as it is and you're just interested in that extra resolution and adding some HDR, you're going to get far better HDR performance from a direct view device, which like a TV, a 55-inch screen, that's quite a jump up from 43 inches. So I would imagine you're going to see quite a difference screen real estate there. So yeah, I would suggest that if you're happy with the cinema room as it is, get a 55-inch TV, 4K with good HDR, an LG C1. They are going for very good money at the minute. It's like an absolutely cracking all-round TV. That would be my suggestion to you. Go and have a look at one of those. Certainly from a value for money point of view. And it was our Best Buy TV of the year. Have a look at that and see if that's going to fit the bill. Because if you're happy with your cinema room, there's no point spending money
trying to tear it to bits.
Yeah, stick with it until, like you say, you see a second-hand Sony or JVC turn up on the forums classifieds, then snap one up. You don't have to buy these things new. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Brendan, and thank you very much for your support as a patron. It is appreciated very much. Right, software is going to be very quick this week because we're not going to talk about discs or anything because I ain't seen any. Steve's not here. And Ed's going to talk about his album. So we'll be back in a sec with software.
If you enjoy the podcast on YouTube, then please like and subscribe. If you're listening to the audio version, then please leave us a rating on your podcast app. We invite you to email questions and feedback to podcast@avforums.com and join in with this episode's discussion thread in the podcasts forum at AV Forums.
Right, Ed, Tinkly Pianos, what's your album of the week?
It isn't always about music that hits you in the face. I mean, this week is not about music that hits you in the face. Yes, it's a piece of modern classical music. So if that is immediately alarming to you, then yeah, just glaze over for a minute. I'll be done quite quickly. This is an artist called Poppy Ackroyd. She is a lady based in Brighton. She is a classically trained multiple instrumentalist, but she does most of her work with the piano now. When I say that Poppy Ackroyd plays the piano, she plays the whole damn thing. Her album before this, Resolve, features percussive use of hitting bits of it, getting a creak out of the lid, which is worked rhythmically into things. It was really quite avant-garde, and she is monumentally good live. I mean, simply out of this world. I don't care if you don't think you'd enjoy it. You'd come away thinking that was astonishing. The thing is, this album is a bit different to some of that. This is a much more considered piece of piano work. It was recorded largely during lockdown, as so many of these albums being released at this point are. And it is more classically oriented. I mean, they are new compositions, but there's less hitting random bits of the piano. I mean, she strums the actual string board at a couple of points and things like that, but it is more conventionally piano based. My recommendation for this is just sit, especially if we get a cold, sunny morning or something like that, just sit and let it happen. And I just think it's glorious. They are just wonderful pieces of music. They don't overstay their welcome. The whole album doesn't overstay its welcome. It is on all of the major streaming services. You can buy it from the Bandcamp site, which is linked to, well, it's appeared in the pod video window, but if you do a search for Poppy Ackroyd Bandcamp, it will bring up all of her albums. And I just think it's absolutely lovely. Not everything in this world needs to be about, high impact. And I just think it is a wonderfully considered piece of music. If you are after something a little bit more ballistic, this week also saw the release of the legendary 1979 Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band concert at Madison Square Garden. That's on the major streaming services as well. First time that he ever played the River, and my thanks to my brother for pointing that out, because I didn't know that, because I'm not quite so committed to the Church of Bruce Springsteen as he is. So there's lots of options there. As those of you watching the podcast can now see, I did actually buy the Poppy Ackroyd album on vinyl. It's One Little Independent is the record label, the offshoot of One Little Indian. It is a nice piece of vinyl. It did respond well to being cleaned. Sometimes new vinyl is not quite as clean as it could be. So this actually had to be cleaned before it really delivered. If you are worried about that, just get the digital download, because that's going to be absolutely flawless, and it's a lovely recording. There you go, Phil. I think
Okay.
that was about 100 seconds of talking about piano
Not a
music,
problem.
and we're good
No
now.
problem. I did listen to Poppy, and it was on in the background. I didn't really take it in, but yeah, I will give it a go, Ed. But it was
Well, I'll tell you what. If you wanted to see what she does more traditionally, the album that she did beforehand, Resolve, it is on all the major streaming services again. You might find that a more interesting listen than this, and it possibly provides a bit more context to why this one sounds like it does. So see how you go there.
okay. I know we're in the software section, but I have seen a couple of questions pop up, so I'm just going to quickly cover those because we have the time to do it. So Ian Downs asked, have you done best settings for the JZ1500 yet? The video is coming for both the 1500 and the 2000 because they're basically the same panel, same TV, just the sound's different. But if you want best picture settings off the top of my head, it's filmmaker mode for both SDR and HDR. And the light sensor, the ambient light sensor, you can switch that off if you like. If you're watching in the dark and that's your normal viewing, then switch it off. If you want it to adapt for during the day and at night, you can of course leave that on and it will adapt. I don't like it personally, but there's nothing wrong with it because Panasonic have spent some time in the filmmaker mode, the same as Dolby Vision IQ, to make sure it looks appropriate to the content. So it's not awful. You can leave it switched on, but if you want it accurate and you want the as intended, just make sure that the light sensor is switched off. Right, so hopefully that covers all the questions. Let's all licensed taximans back in the chat this evening. Nice to see you. Compliments to your colleagues, your taxi men of London. They were very, very good on my trip last week. It's always good to get nice service, good service. And I know the competition and the pandemic hasn't helped, but it was nothing but praise for the politeness and so on for the service. So thanks for that. Right, Ed, what have you been watching this week just to wrap up?
Well, in terms of, I suppose, things that actually got reviewed on the site, I did start Cowboy Bebop, and I hated it much less than I thought I was going to. It's still awkward watching them rejig something iconic, and half of me thinks they would have been better off actually just doing completely different different plot lines than trying to sort of redo some of the ones that were in the original animated series. Nevertheless, I think it's beautiful. I think it's done with good intentions, the best intentions, and I've enjoyed it. You know, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's something is one of the things I've seen on Netflix recently that I've actually, I've taken the time out to watch and enjoy. But I'll be honest with you, Phil, it's MasterChef season now. I mean, Steve's not here, so you'll be spared the full, drill on that. But it's, unashamedly, I love MasterChef The Professionals. It's bloody wonderful. On Monday night, we were treated to that rarest of things now, because they're all generally very good. We were treated to someone who was a bit delusional and rubbish and served Greg Wallace just a random egg yolk, which made him very cross. So that was all good. And then I'm going to involve you at this point. Obviously, Top Gear is restarted. Do you know what? They may have made a tactical error doing that Eddie Kidd sequence in the first episode.
Which was absolutely fantastic. I mean, Paddy McGuinness is normally an arse. And I normally have an issue with him. He could be over the top. That was probably one of the most emotional, sensitive pieces of filmmaking I've seen ever on Top Gear. It was absolutely superb. And you could tell he was meeting his hero.
Yes.
And you could tell his hero was happy after all this time to be acknowledged. And the smile on the face said it all. And I'm not going to lie, I was cutting an onion at the time. It was... It was quite emotional, but yes, it seems to have been an early highlight because this week's
it was all right. It passed an hour perfectly.
It was okay, but it didn't quite have the same heart to it. I think.
No, although I have to say, as someone who has accidentally rubbed their face after cutting a Carolina Reaper, and whatever Andrew Flintoff is made out of.
He's got no fear, has he, that point?
Well, no, and apparently no pain receptors either, because, as I say, I rubbed my face after prepping something involving Reapers, and at one stage, it only lasted about 10 minutes, But at one stage, I was during that 10 minutes, I was thinking I may need to go to the NHS walk-in centre here, because I think I have actually done myself some meaningful damage. So the idea of ingesting it orally, just as it is, I mean, in 2 kilos of chili, it's still quite a potent
I thought
thing.
you did the Iceland one. Did you not do the Iceland curry with that in it?
Yes, but I ate it, and it wasn't on its own, Phil. It was infused in tomato sauce and something that was apparently chicken. So that's not the same thing. Just biting down on a Carolina Reaper is just, I mean, that's Victoria Cross style lunacy. So max respect to that. I'm pleased. I will say it wasn't a vintage episode. I will say, and I'm going to be, socially aware at this point, the effortlessness with which they are working electric vehicles into Top Gear, into the context of what they do. I still think they're being unfair about range. I mean, yes, it's in a surprise to absolutely nobody. If you have an electric car which says it will do a range of X and then strap a caravan to the back of it, amazingly, that range will not be achieved. It's exactly the same with a petrol car. I mean, obviously, the ramifications of what happens when you're low are different. But nevertheless, I think it's admirable. Let's face it, this is how things are going. I like how electric vehicles are being worked into the program.
Yeah, it was interesting. Obviously, it was filmed up here, so my part of the country, and it's not very flat up here. So you've got hills and everything else to factor in. So it was a good test, I thought, of electric vehicles have a tremendous torque, but what are they like actually towing something, and what effect does that have on your range and on your battery? And of course, up and down hills as well is going to add to it. So you can get your regen going down the hill, but will your battery actually last going up it? It was interesting viewing. It was interesting, and the models that they picked were not the usual suspects either. So
no, I mean, I have to say, it was interesting that Harris on Twitter said afterwards that the one he'd actually have is by some considerable margin is the Polestar. It's the only one of those three I've driven, and I have to say it's a monumentally good thing, and it's a nicer place to sit than a certain well-publicized American manufacturer of electric cars. I mean, obviously the powertrain of those well-publicized American electric cars is extremely good, but I just like the Polestar. The Polestar is, as someone that's spent a lot of time in cars, that it's less jarringly different, and it doesn't feel less different for difference's sake. Dragging this back briefly to television, Phil, did you do anything with Foundation?
No, I haven't watched it yet.
Well, Foundation wrapped up its first season, and there's been confirmation that there will be more to come. I had a love-hate relationship with Foundation because it definitely had certain episodes relatively early on in the cycle where it's just like, I don't quite get what you're trying to do with this one. But all power to them. I think that they tied a few strands together into something more cogent and cohesive. They introduced some moments of genuine tension and genuine suspense towards the latter end of this first season. It stayed beautiful throughout. I finished it quite enthusiastically, and I'm looking forward to there being more in the fullness of time. So I obviously, as and when you get around to watching it, Phil, I don't want to do any spoilers at all. But I thought it had a moment of being a bit lost, episodes 3 and 4 in particular. But no, I think it then cracked on with stuff, and I'm looking forward to more of it. And I was genuine towards the end. I was genuinely looking forward to episodes on a Friday, and you can't say fairer than that. So, yeah.
No, there's lots of things I need to catch up on. I just haven't got round to it just yet. And of course, Hawkeye landed this week. Kaz's review's up. It's on the homepage, as well as a few others. So check out the homepage for the latest TV show reviews. The boys have covered them. But I guess that wraps it up for this week, because you don't do Strictly, do you? And
no, I mean, I when I'm down at my parents', I watch it, and I have I need to be very clear about this. I greatly dislike this sort of enforced snobbery towards aspects of mainstream Saturday night television. It's gloriously shot. I mean, the musicians on Strictly are Jedis, fundamentally Jedis with trumpets. They are phenomenal.
Well, this is the first series I've actually watched. I'd never seen it up to this point. I knew it existed, but I never watched it up to this point, and I've been blown away with just how good the celebs are. Just how good the whole production is, and like you say, the music, the musicians, the band. It's been fantastic, and the thing for me, I think this year, watching it has been Rose. I just think she is
the Deaf Lady.
She is absolutely phenomenal. How she can do that and she can't hear anything. She's just going on what she can feel, and obviously the lead from her partner. It's astonishing because she's one of the best dancers on there by some margin. And the fact that she's deaf as well, it's just unbelievable. So if you haven't seen it, it's worth watching just for her performances. And when you realize she did a number last week, not this Saturday, but the previous Saturday.
Yeah, where it cut to silence.
Where it cut to silence, it cut to what she actually hears. And they kept dancing in beat, in rhythm. And it was fantastic. It was amazing because it just for that 1 second gave you a snapshot of what it was like for her. So if you get an opportunity, give it a watch. And it's coming towards the end now. It's getting very, very cutthroat as we get towards the final. So again, it's the first time I've ever watched that. And it's been cracking viewing. I've really enjoyed it. As Bake Off, although Bake Off has gone a bit controversial, one of the favourites went out 2 weeks back. It was the final last night. And the one I'd pegged on to win, just based on the fact that he'd been middle of the road all the way through and then was suddenly peaking, didn't win it. So again, it was a bit, okay.
Well, I mean, as I say, I enjoy Bake Offs. I enjoy Bake Off. It has the problem that then the last 2 episodes collide with MasterChef starting, and I just automatically prioritize that. It's multiple episodes a week, and I have to try and keep up with it. So they would do better, Channel 4, to start it 2 weeks earlier. You heard it here first. So.
Okay. So that's it for this week. We've done our best to keep it fairly on track. Unfortunately, the software section is Steve's area. Steve's the only one that still buys 4K discs and so on. But it's always interesting to find out what's out and so on. So we'll do that on the next podcast that we are on. Don't forget it's a movies podcast next week. So do tune in for that. Kaz, Mark, and Simon have been doing a fantastic job. Blending AV with movies and what they think of movies, and also where you can find them, where you can watch them, what the best disc versions are. Should you watch it on streaming? Is it in Dolby Vision? All that kind of thing. They cover it in some detail. Kaz lives his life watching movies every waking hour of the day. So there's not a lot that Kaz doesn't know about movies and what's on streaming service and so on. So if you haven't watched the movies podcast or listened to it, then please give us a sample, give it a sample, and then give us your feedback. Let us know what you think of that. And before we say our goodbyes, Ed, we've got the small matter podcast exclusive competition to win Mortimer and Whitehouse Gone Fishing, the complete 4th season. So
now I'm not going to swear to this, but I think Kaz has left you a clue to the question, the answer to the question in the question itself. All right, so listen carefully. To win a copy of Mortimer and Whitehouse Gone Fishing, complete 4th season on Blu-ray, just use the following question to select the correct answer from the competitions page. What is Bob Mortimer's first name?
That's difficult, that one. I'm really racking my brain.
Obviously sometimes, Kaz, as a master of deception, is on a magnificent double bluff. But I don't think he's on a double bluff this evening. I think that might be exactly as it says on the tin.
I'll tell you what, if you get that one wrong, I'd be worried. But anyway, that's it for the podcast this week. My thanks to Ed Selley.
Oh, hang on. All over the place. I went to kindergarten. I know how the alphabet works.
And we would be saying goodbye to Steve, but unfortunately he never made it this week. So hopefully we'll get his internet. We'll get the 50 pence he's put back in the meter and get his internet back up and running for the next time. Of course, if you have enjoyed the podcast, then please do consider subscribing to the channel. Hit the notification bell as well. And why not leave us a like? And also thank you to the 100,000 of you who are now subscribing to the channel.
Yes.
It's taken us a long time to get to this point, but it really is appreciated, all your support. So thank you very much. Of course, you can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. You can bookmark avforums.com for the latest reviews, news, and videos. And of course, if you are listening on a podcast provider and they allow you to rate the podcast, then please do give us the highest rating possible if you've enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for listening and watching. And don't forget the Movies Podcast next week.